Okay, hi. This is part two of our lecture today, and I want to talk about the Brereton reading, which is more specifically about animals. And because Okja is such a strong film about animal rights, I think it's worthwhile talking more about animals. This also gives us a little of continuity from the past few weeks where we've been talking about wildlife and animation, etc. So I start with a rhetorical question, really, which is, why do we like animal videos so much? I mean, if you think about on Facebook, YouTube, there's so many videos about cats, animals. I put a screenshot here of the Dodo, which is a website that's devoted entirely to just funny animal videos. And they're the joke that maybe cats rule the internet. There's something to this. I don't have the exact answer. I mean, some of the things that come up through the readings is people get pleasure, but they also want to be informed. So there's enjoyment because some of these videos are funny, but they also want to learn about animals, learn about other types of animals. They're curious. We have a lot of curiosity. So that's one of the themes that I'll explore more today. Another is that animals do not live a compromised existence. Dogs and cats are always themselves, and all animals are always themselves. And maybe we admire that in animals in a way that we always feel like we have to compromise ourselves to be who we are. Speaking of which, I have a friendly visitor here. One thing that's interesting, I have one example here because I remember when I was younger, the original Mad Max film, there's a scene where a dog gets killed and everyone just cries and cringes when the dog gets killed. Yet, hundreds of humans are getting killed throughout the film and people don't have the same response. And maybe you can think of a movie where an animal was killed and it made you very sad, but when you see humans killed, it doesn't bother us. So why is that? I think that's something to think about. That's a very strange phenomenon. So in Okja, one of the strong themes is about factory farming. And I don't want to give too much away because I'd like you to watch the film first before we talk about that. But in the Brereton chapter, he does give us some different ethical positions about animal rights, and Peter Singer is probably one of the most famous advocates of animal rights, and he argued that the cruelty to animals was analogous to slavery. So in other words, the way we treat animals, especially for food, is really ethically and morally no different than slavery. And I think that slaughtering animals for human consumption does remain a core environmental ethical dilemma. This is a problem that does not go away. It's something we find uncomfortable. We don't like to talk about it. This is a topic that Okja gets into, so hopefully you will pick up on that when you watch the film. Mary Midgley has a slightly different, more elastic ethical stance, which is that in some conditions, humans can prefer their own rights over the rights of other animals. In other words, if a human is starving, they would have the right to kill another animal. It's interesting to note, this last point here, what kinds of animals that we eat is cultural. For example, in India, you would never eat a cow. I mean, that would be sacrilegious. And different types of animals in Asia, China, for example, people eat things that we would never eat. And in Mexico, they eat grasshoppers. I ate grasshoppers once. It's just like eating nuts. But we might cringe like, oh my God, how could you eat that? Well, because food is so cultural. Okay, now moving on. I thought John Berger, this is all, by the way, coming from the Brereton article, makes the fascinating point that because animals have disappeared, and I put here a graphic showing you the extinction rate that is we're living through these days. I mean, we're in what is called the Great Sixth Mass Extinction. I mean, since 1970, look at that. 52% of all the Earth's birds, mammals, fish, and reptiles and amphibian populations have been wiped out. I mean, that's amazing if you think about it. I have a film still here from the movie Life of Pi, which if you haven't seen is a beautiful film. which sort of, I think, illustrates this fascination we have with animals. So let's go back to Berger. Because animals have disappeared, we desire to see them in film. Quote, in the last 2 centuries, animals have gradually disappeared. Today we live without them. And in this new solitude, anthropomorphism makes us doubly uneasy. So there is this kind of strangeness that we experience of desiring to watch animals. We don't see them in real life anymore, so we're attracted to seeing them, but it also reminds us of the fact that animals are disappearing. That makes us uneasy, even if we're not consciously aware of it. So film's effective power is one of its most important characteristics. We talked about this at the beginning of the semester. Film is probably one of the most emotional types of media that can really get us to connect with something. So in terms of connecting to animals, film might be the most powerful medium to do that, to invoke empathy for animals. One thing I'd like to point out, which is just an interesting phenomena, which is this concept of charismatic megafauna. So charismatic megafauna is this concept that there's certain charismatic species of animals that we are attracted to for different reasons, whether elephants, pandas, otters, dolphins, gorillas. And we tend to care about them because for some reason they're charismatic to us, that they're cute or they're intelligent. And there is some discussion about in animal rights circles that this is problematic, because why don't we care about animals that are ugly or animals that are maybe unimportant to us, like ants or spiders or things that maybe repulse us, and that not all animals are viewed the same. I think charismatic megafauna would be a great name for like a psychedelic punk band. Okay, so Okja, let me move this here, is the main creature in the film that we're going to see this week. It's kind of a hybrid dog elephant. It's not a real animal. It's created in with CGI. So that's why I really wanted to talk about the animation of animals once again, but from a slightly different point of view. So one of the points that the reading makes is that we might be fascinated by these sort of animated hybrid animal humans because it evokes in us the question of our own animality. Like, what makes us a human versus an animal? Are we really that different? So by breaking down these borders, and I have different examples here, from Avatar to the talented Mr. Fox, or Fantastic Mr. Fox and Okja, what attracts us to these kind of films? Why do we like to see these animal-human hybrids? So let's go back to the ethics of meat. Carol Adams talks about that in order for us to transform an animal into meat, in other words, something that we eat, we have to erase it. We have to make it not exist. We have to erase its animalness. So we don't want to think about the cows or the pigs or the chickens. We want to erase those from our memories or from their existence in order to justify eating them. But what film can do is bring back the animal, to make it alive again, to remind us that they're alive, that they exist. So what the cartoon world does, and by cartoon I'm also here talking about CGI animation, because that's a different type of cartooning, even though it's more realistic. The animal world and human world seem to be the same, yet different. So they want to play with this gap between human and animal, to problematize this, and to sort of bring the animal back, to make us identify with animals as something to care about, something to identify with, something that's like us, as opposed to something that's other and not like us. The chapter argues that the Planet of the Apes film series is fascinating for people. They're attracted to it because it allows us to get inside the minds of animals, to try and understand what is their motives, what are their emotions, what drives them. And then Sean Kubit, who is a reading I did not assign to you, makes a point. One thing that's fascinating about films where we have animals is that, in a sense, animals are like aliens to us, and when we try to talk to them, it's not necessarily that we're trying to learn about what the animal is, but to learn about who we are. In seeing and in contact with the alien, we learn what is human. The same can be applied to animals. So these are just things to play with when we think about Okja, the film. Another point that was made is that films have a tendency to overly romanticize. So, for example, the book Gorilla in the Mist versus the film Gorilla in the Mist portray gorillas quite differently. In the book, Diana Fossey, who's the famous biologist who worked with gorillas her whole life, describes among gorillas infanticide, masturbation, incest, fellatio, and cannibalism as sort of common occurrences in the gorilla world. But you would never see these things in a Hollywood film. So why is that? Why would we not see what we call maybe those dark side of gorilla life, or just that sort of animalistic aspects of gorilla life? We just would not see that in a Hollywood film. I think that's interesting. It's something to think about. Okay, last but not least, I want to close with just a comment by Sean Cubitt. Again, this is not a chapter I assigned you, but he makes a really interesting point, which is that eco-cinema, one thing that it does that no other type of medium can do, is that it intervenes between the human and the inhuman world. It takes us to places that we cannot know. He gives two examples from his book, these submarines that go into the trenches of the deep ocean, and obviously none of us in our lifetime will ever probably have that opportunity, so we get to see something there that doesn't exist. So it makes something visible that is not normally visible. So in the same sense, all these films dealing with animals have that function. They're making something visible to us that maybe normally we don't understand or have access to. So I'm going to close with that, and I will, at the end of the week, post a short video about Okja. Until then, watch the film, do the readings, and do your posts in the forum, and we'll chat more later. Bye.